Margarita Teresa of Austria, born on July 12, 1651, in the Real Alcázar of Madrid, was a Spanish infanta whose brief life encapsulated the glories, contradictions, and tragedies of the Habsburg dynasty. Daughter of King Philip IV and his niece Queen, Mariana of Austria, Margarita grew up in a world of extravagant opulence, courtly intrigues, and a practice of inbreeding that, though strategic for preserving power, proved to be a death knell for her family. Her life, woven with threads of luxury, politics, and sacrifice, mirrors a dynasty that, in its quest to dominate half the world, ignored the laws of nature, sowing the seeds of its own collapse. To understand Margarita, one must delve into the details of her world, a Baroque tapestry of velvet, diplomacy, and a genetic legacy that, though unknown in the 17th century, would dictate her tragic end. The Real Alcázar of Madrid, where Margarita first opened her eyes, was a palace that exuded majesty but also an almost theatrical oppression. Its endless corridors, lined with portraits of kings and queens whose painted gazes seemed to scrutinize passers-by, were a constant reminder of the monarchy's weight. The main chambers, reserved for audiences and ceremonies, were adorned with Flemish tapestries depicting epic battles like Lepanto or classical mythologies, with gods and heroes woven in gold and silk threads. Each tapestry, imported from Antwerp or Brussels, was a masterpiece requiring years of labor, symbolizing the wealth of the Spanish crown. The furniture, carved from exotic woods from the Indies and inlaid with mother-of-pearl, ivory, and ebony, was more sculpture than functional, designed to dazzle ambassadors from France, England, the Ottoman Empire, or even distant Japan, whose envoys occasionally visited the court. Venetian crystal chandeliers reflected the light of hundreds of candles, creating a glow that seemed to defy the gloom of Madrid's long winters. The black and white marble floors, polished to a mirror-like sheen, echoed with the choreographed steps of courtiers and servants. In the private apartments where Margarita spent her early years, luxury did not relent. Beds with crimson velvet canopies were draped with silk coverlets embroidered with gold thread forming the shields of Castile and Aragon. The walls, lined with damask panels in deep blue or emerald green, were adorned with small devotional paintings of virgins and saints by artists of the Madrid school. Windows, framed by curtains so heavy they required multiple servants to open, offered views of the Alcázar's gardens, where stone fountains gurgled and peacocks strutted with fanned tails. Yet this dazzling environment was a gilded cage. Every gesture of Margarita's was governed by stifling protocol that turned a child into a political symbol from her cradle. Her ladies-in-waiting, nobles from families like the Guzman or Velasco, monitored her every move, correcting her posture or words with a blend of deference and authority. Silent but ever-present servants ensured every detail, from room temperature to the gleam of candelabras, was flawless, reflecting the monarchy's prestige. Margarita was the product of a marriage that, even by 17th century standards, was unsettling. Philip IV, aged 46 at her birth, was a man of contrasts, a passionate art patron who made Madrid a cultural hub with works by Titian, Rubens, and Velázquez, yet a financially inept ruler presiding over an empire on the brink of bankruptcy. His first wife, Elizabeth of France, died in 1644 after a marriage that, though less consanguineous, was also political. For his second marriage, Philip chose Mariana of Austria, daughter of his sister Maria Anna and Emperor Ferdinand III, a union requiring papal dispensation due to their close kinship. Mariana, a 14-year-old when she arrived in Madrid in 1649, was not only Philip's niece but a purebred Habsburg, raised in Vienna's court to be an obedient and fertile queen. This marriage was no anomaly for the Habsburgs. It was their modus operandi. The dynasty, ruling Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, and vast territories from Mexico to Manila, viewed consanguineous marriages as a strategy to keep their domains, spanning the Netherlands, Naples, Sicily, Milan, and much of Germany, united. Each wedding between cousins, uncles, or nieces was a political treaty disguised as a matrimonial union, preventing their territories from fragmenting due to inheritance disputes or external ambitions. This obsession with blood purity came at a cost the Habsburgs, in their dynastic arrogance, underestimated. Genetics, though not understood scientifically, manifested in diseases, deformities, and fragility that threatened the empire they sought to protect. Modern geneticists have studied the Habsburg family tree, confirming that repeated marriages between close relatives increased the likelihood of recessive genetic disorders like mandibular prognathism, the Habsburg jaw, metabolic issues, epilepsy, and infertility. Margarita and her younger brother, Charles II, known as the Bewitched, were visible products of this practice. While Margarita appeared healthy in childhood, with golden blonde hair, large blue eyes, and a smile that charmed courtiers, Charles showed alarming signs from infancy. Difficulties walking, speaking, or eating, and a jaw so prominent he could barely close his mouth. Courtiers, ignorant of genetics but fluent in gossip, attributed these ailments to a curse on the Habsburg blood, while royal physicians, with their humoral theories and treatments like bloodletting, purges, and mercury potions, offered no effective remedies. Though Margarita lacked her brother's visible deformities, she bore the invisible marks of a heritage that would render her vulnerable in years to come. Her inbreeding coefficient, estimated at around 20%, meant a fifth of her genes were identical by common descent, heightening risks of reproductive complications and immune issues. From birth, Margarita was a key piece in the Habsburgs' diplomatic chessboard. Her arrival was celebrated with cannon salutes from Madrid's walls and solemn masses in the Alcázar's royal chapel, where choirs sang Latin hymns and nobles in silver-embroidered velvet capes made exaggerated bows. Church bells rang for days, and Madrid streets filled with processions of clergy and penitents praying for the new Infanta's health. But this jubilation was not just for the child. It was for what she represented, a chance to strengthen ties between the Spanish and Austrian branches of the dynasty. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648, ending the 30 Years' War, had weakened Spain against a rising France under Louis XIV, the Sun King, whose ambitions threatened Habsburg domains in the Netherlands and Franche-Comté. The solution, per Habsburg tradition, was a strategic marriage, and Margarita, with her apparent vitality and childish beauty, was an ideal candidate from her cradle. Margarita's childhood, though steeped in luxury, was far from carefree. The Real Alcázar, with its black and white marble halls, frescoes of Castilian glories, and Venetian chandeliers hanging like constellations, was a labyrinth of etiquette and surveillance. Every move was governed by protocol dictating how she greeted ambassadors or held a goblet at banquets. Her dresses, masterpieces of craftsmanship, were both a physical and symbolic burden. Crafted by Madrid's finest tailors using fabrics from Genoa, Lyon, or Antwerp, they shimmered with gold and silver embroidery depicting flowers, birds, heraldic lions, or Castile and Aragon's shields. Each garment took weeks to create in workshops buzzing with needles, scissors, and silk bolts. Corsets reinforced with bone or metal molded her childish figure into a rigid silhouette symbolizing court discipline. Skirts, supported by wicker or wire frames, spanned meters, making navigation of the Alcázar's narrow corridors a test of precision. Jewels, pearl necklaces from the Indies, emerald earrings, diamond brooches set in gold, were not mere adornments but symbols of an empire reliant on Potosi-esque silver, mined at a human cost courtiers preferred to ignore. These outfits, often heavier than Margarita herself, were designed not for a child but for an infanta projecting Spain's grandeur, even as the kingdom drowned in debt and lost wars in Europe. Her education reflected her destiny as a future royal bride, a rigorous process to mold her into a figure fit for any European court. Mornings began with religion lessons from black-robed chaplains teaching Catholic principles, a cornerstone of Habsburg identity. She prayed the rosary with precision, reciting Latin Ave Marias and Pater Nosters while clutching amber or coral beads. Classes covered lives of martyr saints like Teresa of Avila or Ignatius of Loyola, whose tales of sacrifice echoed the role Margarita was to play, a life of obedience and service to the crown. These clerics, with stern faces and devotional books, instilled that her virtue was a shield for the dynasty, an abstract idea that sank deep into her young mind. Dance lessons followed, teaching the pavane, galliard, and courante movements requiring ethereal grace and near-military discipline. Italian or French masters corrected every head tilt, wrist turn, and step in mirrored salons reflecting her tiny figure swathed in voluminous skirts. These Venetian mirrors, imported at exorbitant cost, were a court novelty, letting Margarita see her transformation into a regal figure, though she sometimes giggled struggling to balance in heavy gowns. Dance was not just art, it was diplomacy, showcasing monarchical elegance at events scrutinized by foreign ambassadors. Lessons took place in a parquet-floored salon with tapestries of hunting scenes, a setting more for impressing than teaching. Music was another priority. Margarita played the clavichord with small but nimble fingers, performing Spanish madrigals by Juan de Hidalgo and Italian arias by Cavalli that filled salons with melancholic notes. Her teacher, a royal chapel musician, composed short pieces for her, simple yet ornate enough to impress courtiers. The clavichord, with its soft, delicate sound, was her favorite, and she practiced scales and melodies in a small, lavish room with frescoes of lyre-playing angels. Her clear, tuned voice shone in musical evenings where courtiers, seated on carved floral chairs, applauded enthusiastically. These candlelit soirees, with silver candelabras, were orchestrated events where Margarita, in shimmering silk, sang songs blending madrigal melancholy with Baroque exuberance. The applause, though genuine, also flattered the king, and Margarita, even at 5 or 6, seemed to grasp her talent was part of a larger performance. Embroidery, though tedious, was mandatory, deemed an essential feminine virtue in an era valuing patience and delicacy in royal women. Seated on a red velvet stool, Margarita stitched altar cloths, monogrammed handkerchiefs, or small decorative tapestries, pricking her fingers as her ladies-in-waiting, nobles from houses like Medina Sidonia or Alba, shared court tales to ease the monotony. These women, in elaborate gowns, subtly vied for her favor, advising on colors: crimson for passion, sapphire for purity, gold for royalty, or gossiping about courtiers' affairs, careful not to overstep. Embroidery, though dull, was discipline. Finished pieces, often gifted to churches or ambassadors, symbolized her piety and grace. Foreign languages, especially French and German, were vital for her future in a distant court. Tutors, clerics and noblewomen, taught grammar, vocabulary, and courtly phrases using books from Paris, Lyons, or Vienna. French, the language of diplomacy and fashion, was taught by a preceptor from Versailles, drilling expressions like mon coeur or ma chère, with a nasal tone that sometimes made Margarita laugh, though a stern glance corrected her. She read Ronsard's poetry and etiquette manuals, mastering formal letter writing with impeccable calligraphy. German, more guttural and less familiar, was harder, but Austrian tutors sent by Emperor Ferdinand III were patient, teaching not just language but Viennese customs. They brought grammar books, Alpine castle tales, and descriptions of Austria's Gothic cathedrals, painting a world both familiar and alien. Lessons occurred in a room with hand-drawn Flemish maps showing Habsburg domains, ships sailing the Atlantic, Bohemian castles, heraldic lions roaring on coats of arms. For Margarita, these maps were a constant reminder her life served those territories, an abstract notion that sank deep into her. At age 2, Margarita was already a public figure, not by choice but by her father's design. Philip IV, obsessed with art and propaganda, commissioned Diego Velázquez, the court's greatest painter, to create portraits that made her an icon of Spanish monarchy. In Infanta Margarita Teresa in a pink dress, 1653, she wears a satin gown more like a textile sculpture than a comfortable garment, its folds catching light perfectly. Her expression, a mix of innocence and slight annoyance, is almost comical, as if thinking, "How much longer must I stand here?" Velázquez's studio, in an Alcázar room with high windows letting in noon light, was filled with canvases, brushes, and turpentine-scented pigment jars. Margarita stood still for hours, with breaks only for sugared water or a stool rest, as Velázquez adjusted curtains and mirrors to capture her skin's glow and dress's sheen. The reserved painter rarely spoke during sessions, but chronicles suggest a special bond with Margarita, whom he saw as a muse embodying both innocence and monarchy's weight. Attending courtiers, nobles or high clergy, praised Velázquez's precision, noting how each brushstroke captured not just her likeness but her fate. These portraits were not mere decorations but diplomatic tools. Many were sent to Vienna, packed in velvet-lined wooden crates and escorted by armed guards against bandits and storms. In Vienna, the Hofburg Palace received them with solemn ceremonies, displaying them in salons where nobles assessed not just Margarita's beauty but her political value. Each brushstroke was an investment in the dynasty's future, projecting power and continuity. The vivid colors of her gowns, the gleam of jewels even as a toddler, and Velázquez's precision with her large eyes, rosy cheeks, and golden hair declared Spain, despite its struggles, could still produce worthy heirs. For Margarita, these portraits were another burden, proof her life wasn't hers. Posing for hours under Velázquez's scrutiny must have been exhausting, but no complaints are recorded. Perhaps because, even then, she knew infantas don't complain. Her most iconic painting is Las Meninas, 1656, created when she was 5. This Velázquez masterpiece is an artistic puzzle, a play of perspectives and meanings fascinating art historians for centuries. At its heart is Margarita, small yet magnetic, in a white and silver gown glowing as if lit by an unseen spotlight. The dress, with wide wings and lace details, testifies to court luxury but also a textile prison restricting movement. Around her are her entourage, ladies-in-waiting Maria Agustina Sarmiento and Isabel de Velasco, court dwarfs Mari Barbala and Nicolas Pertusato, a dozing mastiff, and Velázquez himself, painting a massive canvas. The studio, a large Alcázar room with high windows and black and white tiles, saw Velázquez work with focus, his huge canvas dominating. The characters were Margarita's daily companions, her maids, noble daughters teaching etiquette, the dwarfs, blending humor and affection, the mastiff, a rare family touch in a symbolic scene. Las Meninas is a technical marvel, using light and depth masterfully. Velázquez's perspective immerses viewers, with light illuminating Margarita's face and creating reflections in mirrors and floors for a three-dimensional effect. The mirror at the back, showing Philip and Mariana, adds mystery. Are they present, watching, or merely reflected in Velázquez's canvas? This ambiguity fuels the painting's allure. For experts, Las Meninas exalted Spanish monarchy, with Margarita as its future, but her curious expression hints at a child dreaming beyond her role. The king's reflection reinforces their control over her fate, though she's the visual focus. Its complexity lies in being a court portrait, psychological study, and meditation on artistry, with Margarita uniting these layers. To courtiers, it affirmed Habsburg grandeur. To us, it's a reminder of humanity crushed by duty. Banquets at the Alcázar were another arena where Margarita, even as a child, had to shine. Tables, arranged in a U-shape for all to see the king, were draped in white damask embroidered with Castile and Aragon's shields. Sugar centerpieces shaped like mythical creatures or heraldic lions were displayed as art before consumption. Servants, trained to near invisibility, served dishes like chestnut-stuffed capons, eel pasties, or peacocks roasted with reattached feathers for drama. Crystallized fruits from Sicily's bounty and wines in Venetian goblets flowed endlessly. Musicians in elevated galleries played Juan de Hidalgo's pieces, blending sacred solemnity with Baroque exuberance. Seated between her parents or a high noble, she ate daintily, aware every gesture was watched by foreigners evaluating her and Spain's health. These banquets were propaganda, masking an empire's decay. Under Philip IV, Spain faced economic ruin from wars in Catalonia, Portugal, and the Netherlands. American silver, arriving on storm-tossed or pirate-plagued galleons, barely covered court costs, yet palace life defied reality with ostentation. Outside, famine struck and unpaid soldiers deserted, but courtiers in fur-lined cloaks discussed politics and scandals, ignoring military losses. Margarita, shielded from this, lived where luxury was law, but the pressure to embody a political ideal weighed heavily from childhood. At 9, in 1660, Margarita was betrothed to her uncle, Emperor Leopoldo I, also her cousin and 11 years her senior. Negotiated after the humiliating Peace of the Pyrenees, 1659, which ceded Spanish to Spain, this marriage aimed to counter Louis XIV's dominance and unite Habsburg branches. Talks, conducted in coded Latin to evade French spies, involved ambassadors in Madrid, Vienna, and Rome, where papal approval was needed for the consanguineous union. Her dowry, jewels, tapestries, furniture, and a hefty gold sum, reflected Spanish prestige, though sourced from Potasi's brutal mines, a fact courtiers overlooked. Spanish nobles, aware of the alliance's stakes, hosted lavish receptions for Viennese envoys, serving feasts with pheasant and truffle dishes or pastries with imperial crests. Margarita, the negotiation centerpiece, had no voice, remaining a decorative child symbolizing dynastic hope. No letters reveal her thoughts on her betrothed, but it's hard to imagine a 9-year-old thrilled to marry a man twice her uncle, living in a distant city with alien customs. Spain's rigid etiquette stifled children's opinions, especially an infanta valued for sealing alliances. Post-betrothal, her education intensified, honing skills for her empress role. German lessons increased, with Viennese tutors teaching grammar, courtly phrases, and imperial customs, bringing books on Austrian castles and cathedrals. Dance lessons incorporated Viennese styles, soberer courants and allemands, practiced in a mirrored Alcázar salon. Her wardrobe evolved, blending Spanish flair with Austrian sobriety, though she favored childhood's bright hues. Her father's death in 1665, at her 14, deepened Spain's crisis and her burden. Philip's passing left a kingdom in debt, with wars and a silver-starved economy. His funeral was a lavish mourning spectacle, with black-draped halls and endless requiems. Mariana's regency, navigating noble rivalries and a discontented populace, leaned on Margarita's marriage to bolster Austria's alliance. Her proxy wedding in Madrid in April 1671 was extravagantly opulent despite Spain's poverty, with parades, triumphal arches, and ringing bells. Margarita, in mourning attire, posed for a somber portrait by Juan Bautista Martínez del Mazo, her final image reflecting duty's toll. Her journey to Vienna was an epic ordeal, crossing France, the Netherlands, Germany in treacherous roads, braving bandits and disease. Greeted in cities with tournaments and choirs, she endured exhaustion, her letters to Mariana showing resigned duty. Arriving in Vienna in December 1671, her wedding to Leopoldo I unfolded over days of masses, operas, and fireworks. Leopold, a cultured but austere Habsburg, was more emperor than husband, their union a contract, not love. As empress, Margarita adapted, hosting operas and charity, navigating Vienna's intrigues with charm. But her primary duty, bearing heirs, proved tragic. Her first child, Velázquez in 1667, died in infancy. Of 3 more, only one daughter, Maria Antonia, survived. Pregnancies, exacerbated by archaic medical care and her 20% inbreeding coefficient, ravaged her health. In 1673, after a final devastating childbirth, Margarita died at 21, her death symbolizing Habsburg decline. Her life, immortalized in Las Meninas, was a brief, luxurious tragedy, a warning of a dynasty undone by its own ambition, wrapped in Baroque splendor.